Hello, welcome to Learn English with Technology podcast series. Today, we're going for a deep dive into something you guys sent us a lot of questions about. We're talking about how to make your smart device, like your phone or your tablet, a better language learning partner in 2025.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that 85% of language learners out there are using these devices, but 70% are making some pretty big mistakes. Mistakes that can really hold them back from making the kind of progress they want to see.
Yeah,
And this is a huge opportunity,
absolutely.
I think, for anyone listening to learn from these mistakes and figure out how to, kind of hack their way to a better learning experience. But before we go any further, I think it's important to talk about the 12 mistakes that we're going to be diving into today.
Okay,
Can you give us an overview of these mistakes? What are we going to be talking about today?
sure. So we're going to be covering what I call the device setup drama, the social learning disconnect, the app addiction saga, the privacy paradox, the technical tango, the cross-platform puzzle, the assessment adventure, the ergonomic element, the practice pattern puzzle, the content creation conundrum, the solution toolkit, and the future-proofing framework.
Wow. Those sound a little bit dramatic, some of them.
They do, but they're very real.
Yeah. I love how you've kind of given them these titles. It makes them so much more memorable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, the device setup drama.
Okay.
This sounds a little bit intense. What exactly is going on here?
Well, I think a lot of times we assume our devices are automatically helping us learn, but a lot of times they can actually work against us.
Oh,
How so?
well, if we haven't configured them correctly,
Mm.
we're not setting ourselves up for success.
So it's like my phone could secretly be sabotaging my English progress.
It could be, yeah.
Okay. I'm a little bit nervous now. Can you give me an example of maybe how that happens? Sure. Imagine you're trying to learn English, but your phone's language is still set to, let's say, Spanish.
Okay.
That creates what I call a linguistic tug of war because your device is constantly pulling you back into your comfort zone.
I see. So it's like trying to bake a cake
Right.
and someone keeps switching out your ingredients
It's back
for
for
something else. Okay, so what kind of settings should we be paying attention to then? If it's not just the language, what else?
There are 47 different language-related settings. We should be looking at things like the language setting, things like regional settings. Do you have the right region set for the English that you're learning? Is it American English? Is it British English? We should look at things like keyboard configuration.
Oh, interesting.
Is your keyboard actually set up to help you learn English?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, including myself, I just kind of stick with the default keyboard that came with my phone, and I didn't really thought about changing it.
Yeah, and we should think about things like voice assistant language. A lot of people use their voice assistants. Are we setting that up for success?
Okay, so there's a lot to consider there
A lot to consider, yeah.
in terms of the setup.
And the thing is, most people only adjust a tiny fraction of these settings. They're really missing out on a lot of the personalization that's possible.
Okay, I am definitely feeling like I have been missing out. I'm ready to get into these settings and see what I can tweak. So what else can we do? What other settings can we play with to kind of improve our experience?
Well, we can look at things like notifications, notification settings.
Oh, interesting.
The right notifications can be a really great way to stay consistent, but too many notifications can overwhelm you. So we want to find that sweet spot, the golden ratio of notification.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance
Exactly.
where it's helpful and not just annoying.
Right.
Okay, so notifications, what else?
Another thing that's really important is storage management. Your device could actually be deleting your offline learning materials without you even realizing it. So we need to think about how we're managing our storage.
Well, that's a good point. I have definitely had times where I've downloaded lessons or podcasts, and then suddenly they're gone.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a glitch.
It's not a glitch. It's your device being too helpful.
Ah, okay.
So we want to think about that.
So how do we fix that?
Well, we can designate specific folders or files as protected so your device won't touch them.
Okay, that's a good tip. I'm going to make sure all my language learning stuff is in a protected folder from now on.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about storage, we've talked about notifications. What else is there?
Well, this is really cool. AI learning preferences.
Okay.
A lot of people don't realize their devices are learning from them all the time. And we can actually tell our devices what we want them to be learning.
So my phone's like watching me and learning my habits.
It is. It's watching you.
It's a little bit creepy, but also kind of cool at the same time.
It is both.
Yeah. So how do we make sure it's learning the right things and not just, making assumptions about what we want?
We go into the AI settings and we make sure that we are giving our devices clear instructions on what our language goals are, our preferred learning methods. We can even tell it our ideal practice schedule.
It's like having a personal assistant
It is, yeah.
who's organizing your life.
But a lot of people are letting their personal assistants organize their books by color
Yeah.
instead of subject.
Instead of by the actual topic.
Right.
Oh,
And that's not helpful.
okay. I'm definitely going to be spending some time in my settings after this. So it sounds like we have a lot of control over our devices.
We do.
It's just a matter of being proactive and actually
Mhm.
going in there and taking the time to set them up properly.
Absolutely. And it doesn't take long. We could have like a 5-minute device revolution.
I love that. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm feeling very empowered already. Now that we've tackled this device setup drama, let's move on to the next mistake on our list, which is the social learning disconnect. This one sounds particularly intriguing to me because I feel like I've definitely experienced this before.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly is going on here? What is the social learning disconnect?
Well, it's funny because we live in an age of like unprecedented connectivity, but a lot of language learners are more isolated than ever. And it's a paradox.
That is a paradox.
We have these incredible AI language partners on our phones and our tablets,
Yeah.
but we're forgetting about the power of real human connection.
So we're kind of trapped in these little language bubbles.
Yeah,
Even though we have all the technology to connect with people from all over the world.
absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we get so comfortable practicing with these AI tutors
Mm-hmm.
that we forget what it's like to actually have a conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can you give me a concrete example of this, of the social learning disconnect in action?
Sure. Imagine a learner, we'll call him Jamie, okay? Jamie spends hours practicing pronunciation with his AI tutor.
Okay.
He sounds amazing when he's talking to the AI, but then he freezes up in a real conversation,
Oh, yeah.
Because he's not used to like the natural flow of human interaction, the pauses, the interruptions.
It's like practicing your dance moves in front of a mirror.
Exactly.
And then suddenly you're on the dance floor.
And you have no idea what to do.
And you're like, wait a minute. All those moves I practiced, I can't do them now.
Right. And the crazy thing is, most learners spend less than 10 minutes a day actually interacting with real humans in their target language.
Wow. 10 minutes. That's so little.
It's like owning a teleporter, but only using it to move between rooms in your house.
Yeah. That is perfect analogy. Okay, so we have this technology to connect with people, but we're not using it. Why? What's going on? Why are we so hesitant to actually talk to real people?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding silly, fear of being judged.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know I've definitely been there before. But how do we overcome those fears?
Well, I think the first step is to recognize that everyone feels that way when they're learning a new language. It's totally normal.
Yeah.
The second step is to find a supportive community where you can practice without feeling judged.
So I think a lot of people join language exchange groups online,
Mm-hmm.
but then they never actually participate. They just kind of lurk in the background,
Yeah.
reading the conversations, but not actually contributing.
Exactly. And that's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. So how do we get over that hump? How do we go from being silent observers to active participants?
Well, it's funny because I think part of the problem is that our devices are actually tracking our social learning behavior.
Wait, my phone is watching me be socially awkward.
It is.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly lurking in groups without participating,
Yeah.
your device might start showing you fewer opportunities to interact because it thinks that you prefer solo study.
So it's basically saying, you seem to enjoy watching from the sidelines, so here are some more sidelines to watch from.
Exactly.
Like, that is so unhelpful.
It is unhelpful.
Okay, so the solution then is to talk more.
Talk more. Learn more.
Talk more, learn more. I love it. Okay, so I'm definitely going to challenge myself to be more active in those language exchange groups.
Yeah.
But before we move on, you mentioned some really cool features earlier, like AR language meetups and holographic conversation partners.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about those? Those sound amazing.
They are amazing. Imagine being able to practice your English with a native speaker in a virtual cafe in Paris.
Wow.
Or giving a presentation to a holographic audience of international business professionals.
That sounds incredible.
It is. And it's becoming more and more accessible all the time.
Okay, I need to explore these features. It's like my phone is a portal to this whole new world of language learning
is.
that I never even knew existed.
Ex-
Okay, this is so exciting. I'm already feeling more motivated to get out of my comfort zone and start connecting with other learners.
Good. That's what we want.
But before we get too carried away with these social adventures, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of learners, including myself, struggle with.
Okay.
And that is the sheer number of language learning apps out there. I feel like I'm constantly downloading new apps, trying them out for a few days, and then abandoning them.
Yeah.
It's like I'm addicted to the excitement of trying new apps, but I never actually stick with any of them long enough to see real progress. So what's the solution here? How do we break free from this app addiction cycle?
It's a real epidemic, the app hoarding.
It is. I have so many language learning apps on my phone, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the average learner has 12 apps installed, but actively uses less than 2.
Wow, that's crazy. So all those unused apps, they're not just taking up space on our phones,
Right.
they're also kind of cluttering our minds, right?
They are. They create what I call app-induced learning paralysis.
Okay, app-induced learning paralysis. That sounds serious. What exactly is that?
Well, it's basically that feeling of overwhelm that sets in when you're faced with too many choices. So instead of actually practicing your language, you're just scrolling through your app library trying to decide which app to use.
Oh my gosh, I know that feeling. It's like standing in front of your closet and saying, I have nothing to wear.
Exactly. Too many choices.
Yeah, too many choices.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we break free from this app-induced learning paralysis?
Well, instead of focusing on quantity,
Yeah.
we want to focus on quality.
Quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity, exactly. And, the research actually shows that learners who strategically use just 3 complementary apps make much more progress.
Oh, wow. Just 3.
Just 3. It's what I call app synergy. We want to think of our apps like an orchestra.
Oh, okay.
You need the right instruments working in harmony.
Not 50 violins all playing the same note.
Exactly. You don't need 50 violins.
Yeah. Okay, so it's about choosing the right apps, not just the most popular ones,
The right apps for you.
for your specific needs.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we're going to dive deeper into in a later part of the show.
We are.
So stay tuned for that. But before we move on, can we address something that I think a lot of learners are maybe a little bit apprehensive to talk about? It's this whole issue of privacy. We're sharing so much data with these apps. I think there's a lot of concern about what's happening with that data.
Oh, absolutely. The average language app collects over 300 data points per session.
Wow. 300. That's a lot.
It's a lot, so we need to be thinking about this.
Okay, so it's not just about our learning progress. It's also about our personal information, our privacy. So what can we do to protect our privacy without compromising the benefits of personalized learning?
Well, the first thing is read those privacy policies.
Ugh, nobody wants to read privacy policies. They're so long.
Yeah, I know, but we need to know what we're agreeing to. And we need to take advantage of the data sharing preferences that a lot of apps offer. We can limit the data collection,
Okay.
opt out of personalized ads, We have options.
So it's about taking control,
Absolutely.
not just blindly clicking agree and
Yeah.
hoping for the best.
No. Be informed. Be proactive.
Be informed, be proactive, yes. Okay, I'm feeling much more empowered to protect my privacy. But before we move on, can we talk about something that might seem a little bit unexpected in a conversation about technology?
Okay.
I'm talking about the physical side of language learning. Yeah.
Yes. The technical tango.
The technical tango.
Yeah.
We spend so much time hunched over our devices, tapping away at screens.
Yeah.
I think we often forget about the impact this has on our bodies.
Absolutely. We're talking about things like eye strain, headaches, neck pain, back problems, even carpal tunnel syndrome.
Okay, those are some serious issues.
They are.
I think a lot of people, including myself, are guilty of ignoring these problems until they become really big problems.
Right. And the thing is, your physical comfort is directly linked to your ability to focus and learn. If your body's not happy,
Yeah.
your brain's not happy.
So what can we do to make sure our bodies are happy while we're learning?
Yeah.
Do we need to, invest in fancy ergonomic chairs and standing desks?
You don't need anything fancy. Just a little bit of awareness and some simple adjustments can make a big difference. We want to create what I call comfort focus zones.
Comfort focus zones. I love that. So it's like creating a sanctuary for learning where your body and your mind can both be at ease.
Exactly. And it starts with something as simple as posture.
Okay, posture. What else?
Think about your lighting, your sound environment.
Ah, interesting.
Do you need noise-canceling headphones to block out distractions? Are you working in a space with natural light? These things all matter.
So it's about being mindful of our surroundings
Absolutely.
and creating a space that supports our learning.
Exactly. And remember those dynamic learning positions we talked about.
Yes, the idea of moving around, switching positions.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to stand up, stretch, move around during your study sessions. Your body wasn't designed to sit still for hours on end.
Okay, so no more marathon study sessions glued to my chair.
Yeah.
I can actually move my body and learn at the same time.
Yes.
Uh,
In fact, incorporating movement into your learning routine can actually boost your energy levels,
mhm.
improve your focus, and even enhance your memory retention.
Wow. Movement as a study hack. I love it.
It is.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be more mindful of my physical well-being from now on.
Good.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier that really caught my attention. It's the idea that our devices can actually learn our individual learning patterns
Hmm.
and create these things called learning efficiency signatures. Can you explain that a little bit more? It sounds fascinating.
Sure. So your device is basically like a little detective,
Okay.
constantly gathering clues about how you learn best.
It's watching me learn.
It is watching you learn. It's paying attention to things like what apps do you use? How often do you practice? What time of day do you seem to be most focused?
Mm-hmm.
And it uses all this information to create a unique profile, your learning efficiency signature.
Yeah.
And the signature can be incredibly helpful for identifying areas where you might be struggling or where you could be making even more progress.
So my device is like a personal learning coach who's constantly analyzing my performance and giving me feedback.
Exactly. And it can help you make adjustments to your learning routine. Like if your device notices that you tend to get distracted by social media during your study sessions, it might suggest scheduling your study time for when you're less likely to be tempted by those distractions.
So it's like my phone is saying, hey, I know you. You always get sucked into social media, so let's try studying at a different time.
Exactly. It's like having a little voice of reason in your pocket.
I love it. Okay, I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to those learning efficiency signatures from now on. But before we wrap up this part of our conversation, can we address something that's been lurking in the back of my mind since we started talking about all this incredible technology? It's the question of whether all this technology is actually making us better language learners.
Hmm.
I mean, Shakespeare didn't have a language learning app, so is all this technology really necessary?
That's a great question. And Shakespeare also didn't have access to the vast amount of information and resources that we have today.
That's true.
So I think technology has the potential to be an incredible tool for language learning, but it's important to remember that it's just that, a tool.
A tool, not a magic wand.
Exactly. It can't do the learning for us. We still need to put in the effort, the time, and the commitment to make progress.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between tech-powered learning and good old-fashioned hard work and dedication.
You got it. And I think that's what we're trying to do here today.
Yes, to empower learners to use technology in a way that supports their learning. No, it
Absolutely.
replaces it.
Right.
Okay, well, I am so excited to continue this conversation and to dive even deeper into these 12 mistakes.
Me too.
So stay tuned for the next part of our show.
Great. So you were asking about how to kind of unlock this power of personalized learning, right?
Yes. It's so exciting to think that my phone could actually help me create a truly customized learning experience.
Yeah.
But I'm still a bit mystified by how this all works. Like, can you walk me through some practical steps?
Sure. Um, well, one of the most powerful tools that we have at our fingertips are the device settings.
Okay.
We've already talked about how those settings can make or break our learning, but they can also be the key to unlocking that personalization.
So it's about going back into those settings
Mm.
and really fine-tuning things to our specific needs.
Exactly.
Okay, but where do we even begin? Like, there are so many different categories
Right.
in the setting.
Well, let's start with the language preferences.
Okay.
This might seem obvious, but a lot of times people forget to even tell their device what language they're learning.
Okay. Or what their proficiency level is.
So if I set my language preference to English and I tell it that I'm a beginner, will that actually change the way my device interacts with me?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it helps your device to tailor the content that you're seeing, the difficulty of your lessons, the type of feedback that you're getting.
So it's like having a personal tutor who actually knows where I'm at.
Exactly. And, it's funny because a lot of people, they're trying to learn a new language,
Mm-hmm.
but their device still thinks they're fluent in their native language.
Oh, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. Mixed signals everywhere.
Exactly.
Okay, language preferences, check. What's next?
Well, let's talk about display settings. These might seem like small details, but they can actually have a big impact on your focus, on your learning, on your energy levels. We can adjust things like the font size, the screen brightness, the color schemes.
I've never really thought about display settings as being part of my language learning strategy.
But it makes sense, especially if I'm spending, hours looking at my screen.
Absolutely. You know, if you're trying to decipher tiny text in a dimly lit room, your brain's going to be working overtime.
Yeah, no wonder I get headaches.
Exactly.
Okay, so font size, brightness, those are pretty straightforward. What about color schemes? Does that really matter?
It does. You know, some people find that bright, vibrant colors actually stimulate their learning, while others prefer a more calming palette. So it's about experimenting and seeing what works for you.
Color palettes for language learning. I love it.
It's a thing.
Okay, display settings? Check. Now what about audio?
Audio settings are crucial, especially for listening comprehension. You can adjust things like the volume, obviously, the playback speed, the audio quality, and tailor it to the content that you're listening to and your own listening preferences.
So if I'm listening to like a really fast-paced podcast,
Right.
I can actually slow it down so I can understand what they're saying.
Absolutely. Or, you know, if you're practicing your pronunciation, you can record yourself and then listen back to those recordings at different speeds to really identify, where you need to improve.
It's like having a personalized sound engineer for your language learning.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, audio settings, check. What about notifications? I am constantly bombarded with notifications from all my different apps. It's so distracting.
It's a real problem. It's a form of digital overwhelm for sure. But notifications can also be a really great way to stay motivated and on track. It's about using them strategically.
So it's not about getting rid of notifications completely. It's about being more intentional with them.
Exactly. So the first step is to declutter. Get rid of any notifications for apps that aren't essential or that you find distracting.
Okay, so silence those tempting shopping apps.
Yes, those
Yeah.
can be dangerous. And then, once you've decluttered, personalize the notifications for your language learning apps.
Oh,
Choose what type of alerts you want to receive, how often you want to receive them. You can even set them for specific times of day.
so instead of just getting random notifications throughout the day,
Right.
I can actually schedule them for times when I'm most likely to be receptive to a learning nudge.
Exactly. It's about creating a rhythm that works for you.
I love that. Okay, so declutter, personalize. What else?
Well, this is a really cool one. Location-based notifications.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
So you can set your apps to send you reminders or challenges when you're in specific locations. So for example, imagine you're walking past your favorite coffee shop and your app sends you a notification prompting you to practice ordering a coffee in English.
Oh, wow. So it's like the app knows where I am and what I'm doing and is giving me these little opportunities to practice in real-world situations.
Exactly. It's about making language learning more integrated into your daily life.
Okay, location-based notifications, that's a game changer.
Hmm?
I'm definitely going to be playing with that feature.
Yeah.
But before we move on, can we talk about the elephant in the room? We've been talking a lot about personalized learning and all this data collection,
Right.
but that raises some pretty big questions about privacy. Like, how do I know that my data is being used responsibly?
That's a great question. And it's one that every language learner should be asking. The good news is that you have more control over your data than you might think.
Okay, good. I like to be in control.
So the first step, again, is to be informed. Read those privacy policies, understand what you're agreeing to.
Okay. No more blindly clicking agree, I promise.
Good. And then take advantage of the data sharing preferences that a lot of these apps offer. You can limit the data collection. You can opt out of personalized ads.
So I can still benefit from personalized learning without giving away, the keys to my digital kingdom.
Exactly. You can. It's about finding that balance. And remember, you always have the right to ask questions, to demand transparency, and to choose apps that align with your values.
Okay, I'm feeling empowered to protect my privacy. But before we move on to the next mistake, I want to circle back to a topic that we've touched on a few times already. Algorithmic bias. We're talking about these algorithms that are shaping our learning experiences, but how do we know that these algorithms are fair?
It's a valid concern. Algorithms are created by humans, and
Yeah.
humans are inherently biased. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to be asking those tough questions of the companies that are creating these systems.
So it's about being informed, being critical, and using our voices to advocate for a more equitable language learning landscape for everyone.
Exactly.
I'm ready to be part of that movement. But before we get too deep into the ethics of algorithms, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that might seem a little unexpected in a conversation about technology.
Okay.
And that is the physical side of language learning.
Ah, yes. The technical tango.
We spend so much time hunched over our devices, tapping away at screens, that I think we often forget about the impact this has on our bodies.
Absolutely. We're talking about things like eye strain, headaches, neck pain, back problems,
Yeah.
even carpal tunnel syndrome. These are real issues.
They are. And I think a lot of people, including myself, are guilty of kind of ignoring those aches and pains until they become really big problems.
Yeah, and the thing is, your physical comfort is so important for your ability to focus.
Hmm.
If your body's uncomfortable, your brain's not going to be able to function at its best.
That makes sense. So what can we do to make sure that our bodies are happy while we're learning? Do we need to invest in fancy ergonomic chairs and standing desks and all that?
You don't need anything fancy. Just a little bit of awareness and a few simple adjustments can make a big difference.
Okay, so give me the basics. Where do I start?
We'll start with posture.
Okay, posture.
Make sure you're sitting or standing up straight. Shoulders relaxed, screen at eye level. Imagine you're a puppet with a string attached to the top of your head, gently pulling you upwards.
Okay, I love that image. Time to ditch the hunchback posture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then think about your lighting. Harsh lighting can strain your eyes. Natural light is always best. And then think about sound.
Oh, yeah.
Do you need noise-canceling headphones to block out distractions? Create that calm and inviting space.
So it's about creating a learning sanctuary where my body and my mind can both feel at ease.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so posture, lighting, sound. What
Yeah.
else?
Well, remember those dynamic learning positions we talked about?
Yes. Moving around, switching position.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to stand up, stretch, move around during your study session.
So no more marathon study sessions glued to my chair.
No. Get up and move. Your
Uh-huh.
body wasn't designed to sit still for hours on end.
Okay, so I can actually move my body and learn at the same time.
Absolutely. In fact, incorporating movement can actually boost your energy levels, improve your focus, and even help you remember what you're learning.
Wow. Movement as a study hack.
Mm-hmm.
This is revolutionary.
It is. It's about working with your body, not against it.
Okay, I'm sold.
Mm.
Movement, check.
Yeah.
Now, can we talk about something that I think is a universal source of frustration for anyone who uses technology? And that's apps freezing or crashing.
Yes. The dreaded app crash. So frustrating.
It's the worst, especially when you're in the middle of a lesson
Yeah.
or a conversation and suddenly everything just stops.
Well, and remember, we talked about resource rivalry earlier. All those apps fighting over your device's memory and processing power.
Yeah.
Well, that can definitely lead to crashes. So we want to be mindful of that and make sure that our language learning apps are getting the resources they need to thrive.
So it's like being the budget manager for my device's resources,
Exactly.
making sure that the essential apps are getting what they need to function properly.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to start thinking of myself as a resource manager for my device. But before we move on, can we talk about a tech issue that's near and dear to my heart? I'm talking about Wi-Fi connectivity.
Oh, yes. The bane of every language learner's existence, right?
Yeah, I live in an area with notoriously unreliable Wi-Fi, and it's so frustrating when I'm trying to study.
I hear you. But the good news is that in 2025, our devices are getting smarter about managing those weak connections.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, they can actually predict when you're likely to experience connectivity issues.
Wait, so my phone can tell me when my internet's about to go haywire?
It can. It's constantly monitoring your location and the strength of nearby Wi-Fi networks, and it can use that information to give you a heads up.
That's amazing. So it's like having a weather forecast for my internet connection.
Exactly. And you can use that information to your advantage. You can prioritize certain Wi-Fi networks, you can adjust your download settings, you can even pre-download materials for offline access.
Pre-downloading, yes. It's
Right.
like packing snacks for a long road trip. You never know when you might hit a patch of bad Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Be prepared.
Okay, I'm feeling much more confident about navigating those Wi-Fi woes.
Good.
But before we move on, can we talk about device updates? Sometimes they bring cool new features, but other times they just seem to cause more problems than they solve.
Oh, absolutely. It can be like a game of tech roulette.
It is. So how do we manage those updates without driving ourselves crazy?
Well, the key is to be strategic. Don't feel like you have to update every app the second a new version becomes available.
Okay, so resist the urge to click that Update Now button.
Exactly. Pay attention to how your device performs after updates. If you notice any issues, don't hesitate to roll back to a previous version. And remember, you can always delay updates until a more convenient time.
Delaying updates, yes. Why didn't I think of that before?
It's a lifesaver.
Okay, I'm feeling more and more like a tech-savvy language learner.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up this part of our conversation,
Yep.
I want to circle back to something that's been a recurring theme throughout our discussion. And that's this idea of personalized learning, right? Like, how can we use our devices to create a learning experience that's truly tailored to our individual needs and preferences?
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
It is. But I have to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on the specifics. Can you give me a more concrete example of how this personalized learning magic actually works?
Sure. So imagine a learner who's really struggling with grammar.
Okay.
Their language learning app, using all this data that it's collected,
Hmm.
recognizes this and automatically adjusts the difficulty level of the grammar lessons, provides additional explanations and examples, and even suggests like specific practice activities.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's like having a personal tutor who's constantly monitoring my progress and adjusting the curriculum as I go.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just grammar. Think
Yeah.
about those neural prime time zones we talked about.
The times of day when my brain is most ready to learn.
Right. Well, your device can actually use all this data that it's collecting about your energy levels, your focus, to suggest the optimal times for different types of practice.
So no more forcing myself to study when I'm exhausted.
No more.
I can actually align my learning with my brain's natural rhythms.
Absolutely. It's about working with your brain, not against it.
This is mind-blowing. I'm starting to see my phone less as a device and more as like a personalized learning companion.
It is. It's a guide, it's a coach, it's even a cheerleader.
I love that. Okay, I'm ready to take this partnership to the next level.
Good. That's what we want.
But before we move on, can we address something that's been nagging at me since we started talking about all these amazing technological advancements?
Okay, what's that?
Well, it's this question of whether all this technology is actually necessary for language learning. I mean, people have been learning languages for centuries without the aid of smartphones.
That's true.
Shakespeare didn't have a language learning app.
He didn't. But he also didn't have access to the vast amount of resources that we have today.
That's true. So is it about finding the right balance?
It is. It's about using technology as a tool to support our learning, not as a crutch.
A tool, not a crutch. I love that. Okay, so it's about finding that balance between tech-powered learning and good old-fashioned hard work and dedication.
You got it.
Okay, I'm up for the challenge. But before we wrap up this part of the conversation, I want to bring up something that's been on my mind since we started talking about all these high-tech solutions.
Okay.
We talked about personalized learning, AI tutors, VR language immersion experiences. But what about the people who don't have access to all these things?
That's a really important point. The digital divide is a very real issue, and it's something that we need to address.
It's not enough to just celebrate these advancements in technology.
Right.
We also need to be mindful of the ways in which technology can exacerbate those inequalities.
Absolutely. And I think as we move forward with language learning technology, we need to be thinking about how to make it more inclusive and accessible for everyone.
Yes, to all of that. Okay, well, this conversation has been incredibly thought-provoking. I'm already feeling more empowered to use my device in a more intentional and effective way.
Good.
That's the goal.
So I can't wait to continue this discussion and to delve into the remaining mistakes on our list.
Me too. It's going to be an exciting journey.
All right, so we are back, and I am ready to tackle the final part of our deep dive into these 12 smart device language learning mistakes.
It has been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. We've uncovered so many hidden pitfalls and unexpected challenges, but I'm also feeling really inspired by all the possibilities.
Me too.
So, where do we go from here? How do we take all this information and turn it into action?
Well, I think it's helpful to think of it like a puzzle, right? We've gathered all these pieces, and now it's time to start putting them together to create that bigger picture. So let's revisit those 12 mistakes we outlined earlier. And remember, the goal here isn't to overwhelm you. It's to equip you with the knowledge and the tools to avoid those common pitfalls and make informed choices.
That's a good reminder. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress one step at a time.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do we begin?
Well, let's start with the foundation. The device setup drama. Remember all those language-related settings we talked
Yeah,
about?
yeah, those 47
The ones
settings.
that can make or break your learning experience?
I'm feeling a lot more tech savvy now that we've explored those settings, but I have to admit I'm still a bit overwhelmed by all the options. Like, where do I even start?
Okay, well, let's focus on a few key settings that can make a big difference. First and foremost, your device language. If you're learning English, make sure your device language is set to English. This might seem super obvious.
But you'd be surprised how many people are trying to learn a new language while their device is still speaking their native language. It's like trying to run a race while wearing weights on your ankles.
It creates that linguistic tug-of-war that you were talking about, right?
Exactly. So, device language, English. Check.
Check. Okay, what's next?
Let's talk about your keyboard. Is it set up to help you learn English? Does it have features like predictive text and autocorrect that are tailored to English vocabulary and grammar?
Oh my gosh, I never thought about that before. But it makes so much sense. Like sometimes my keyboard tries to autocorrect English words into Spanish.
Right, because it's not optimized for
It's
English.
like my keyboard is secretly trying to sabotage my learning.
Well, not secretly, but you get the point. So find a keyboard that's designed for language learning. They often have built-in dictionaries, translation tools, all sorts of helpful features.
Keyboard optimization.
Yeah.
Check. What else?
Notifications. They can be a great way to stay motivated and on track, but only if they're used strategically. Remember those adaptive reminder rhythms we talked about?
Yes. The idea of using notifications to gently nudge us toward our learning goals without overwhelming us.
Exactly. So experiment with different notification schedules. See what works for you. Your device can actually learn your preferred notification style and adjust accordingly. It's pretty amazing.
So it's like having a personal assistant who knows when to remind me to practice without being annoying or intrusive.
That's the idea.
Okay, notifications, check. What other settings should we be mindful of?
Storage management. Make sure you're designating your language learning materials as protected so your device doesn't accidentally delete them.
Oh yes, the disappearing downloads. I will definitely be setting up those protected folders.
Good. It's a simple fix that can save you a lot of frustration.
Protected folders, check. Okay, I'm feeling much more confident about my device setup. Now let's move on to a topic that's a little more personal. The social learning disconnect. This one really hits home for me because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I often struggle with the social aspects of language learning.
You're not alone. A lot of language learners feel that way. It's easy to get comfortable practicing with AI, tutors, and apps, but then we freeze up when it comes to interacting with real people. It's like we forget that language is all about communication.
It's like practicing your dance moves in front of a mirror and then feeling completely lost when you're actually on the dance floor.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we go from solo practice to real-world conversations?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that everyone feels a bit awkward and self-conscious when they're first starting to speak a new language. It's totally normal. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. So find a supportive community where you can practice without feeling judged. Challenge yourself to participate in those online conversations, even if it's just a short comment or question. Remember those AR language meetups and holographic conversation partners we talked about?
Oh, yes. Those sounded amazing.
They're a great way to get comfortable with real-time interaction in a safe and supportive environment.
I'm definitely adding explore social learning features to my to-do list. Okay, social learning, check. Now, can we talk about something that I think a lot of language learners struggle with, myself included?
What's that?
The sheer number of language learning apps. I feel like I'm constantly downloading new apps, trying them out for a few days, and then abandoning them. It's like I'm addicted to that initial excitement of trying something new, but I never stick with anything long enough to see real progress.
It's a common problem. We call it the app addiction saga. You get so caught up in collecting apps that you forget to actually use them. But remember, quality over quantity. Choose a few apps that work well together and that align with your learning goals. Think of it like assembling a dream team of language learning apps.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So instead of having a messy toolbox full of random apps,
Right.
I need to create a carefully curated set of tools that complement each other.
Exactly. And in a future episode, we'll dive deeper into the art of app selection and how to choose the right apps for your specific needs. But for now, just focus on quality over quantity.
Okay, app selection, check. But before we move on, I want to bring up the topic of privacy again. We've talked about all these amazing personalized learning features and how apps are collecting so much data about us. It's a little bit unsettling, to be honest.
It's a valid concern. And it's important to be aware of how your data is being used. Remember those privacy policies we talked about. Take the time to read them and understand what you're agreeing to. And remember, you can often customize your data sharing preferences and choose how much information you're comfortable sharing.
Okay, so it's about being proactive and taking control of my data. I can handle that.
You got it. Okay, now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something that might seem unexpected in a conversation about technology, and that's our physical well-being. We spend so much time hunched over our devices, tapping away at screens, that we often forget about the impact this has on our bodies.
Yes, the technical tango. It's so important to remember that our physical health is connected to our mental well-being and our ability to learn.
Absolutely. So let's revisit those comfort focus zones. Remember, it's all about creating a learning environment that supports both your physical comfort and your mental focus. So, good posture, good lighting, a comfortable and quiet space, and don't forget about those dynamic learning positions. Get up, move around, stretch. Your body will thank you, and so will your brain.
I'm ready to create my ultimate learning sanctuary.
Good. Now let's move on to the next challenge, the practice pattern puzzle. This is all about finding the right practice rhythm for you. We often fall into the trap of thinking that more is always better, but when it comes to language learning, quality trumps quantity. And remember those neural prime time zones we talked about. Your device can help you identify those times of day when your brain is most receptive to learning new information, so you can schedule your practice sessions for maximum impact.
Okay, so it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And it's also about listening to your body. If you're feeling tired or unfocused, it's okay to take a break and come back to it later.
Okay, so it's a combination of data-driven insights from my device and good old-fashioned intuition.
You got it. Now, let's talk about something that I think a lot of language learners struggle with. The transition from passive consumption to active creation. We spend hours watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading articles, but then we struggle to actively apply what we're learning.
Oh, that's me. I'm like a language learning sponge, soaking up all this information, but not really doing anything with it.
Right. So we need to shift from that passive consumption to active creation. Start by summarizing articles in your own words, discussing movies with friends, writing responses to podcasts, and don't be afraid to get creative. Write stories, poems, songs. The more you create, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Okay, I'm ready to get creative, but I have to admit I'm a bit scared of making mistakes.
It's a natural fear. But remember, mistakes are a valuable part of the learning process. Embrace them, learn from them, and keep creating.
Okay, I'm going to try to reframe those mistakes as creative fuel.
That's the spirit.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we've touched on throughout this conversation. It's this idea of using technology as a tool to support our learning, not as a crutch to lean on.
Yes, it's a crucial distinction. Technology can enhance our learning experience in countless ways, but it can't do the learning for us. We still need to put in the effort, the time, and the commitment.
Okay, so no magical shortcuts to fluency, just good old-fashioned hard work amplified by the power of technology.
Exactly. And as we move into the future of language learning, it's important to remember that the fundamentals will always remain relevant. Focus on building a strong foundation in those core skills, cultivate a growth mindset, and don't be afraid to experiment.
I love that. Experimentation, a growth mindset, and a solid foundation. Those are the keys to future-proofing our language learning.
You got it. And remember, the future of language learning is bright, but only if we shape it in a way that benefits everyone. Let's use these tools and strategies to create a more inclusive, equitable, and accessible learning landscape for all.
Yes, to all of that. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the 12 smart device language learning mistakes. I don't know about you, but I am feeling inspired and ready to take my language learning to the next level.
Me too.
A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible knowledge and insights. And to you, our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We would love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your questions in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world of language learning and technology. Until next time, happy learning.